Hello, Brobs. We're back with Anyone's Son. A true story by Roberta Roche with the killer Harry de la Roche Jr. Section 24. When I awoke on Monday after an on again, off again sleep, induced by the trauma of Sunday, I was in such a stupor that I felt out of it. A short time later, when I met John Taylor, he said I was practically in a comatose state, but life had fallen in on me. I was locked out of my skull. The clock in the jail said 8:30 when I met my future lawyer, and the first thing I noticed about John Taylor was his 6'4" height. He had dark hair and a mustache and, at the time, a beard. 5 years before we met in jail, he had had another murder case, in which one boy stabbed another, but the case was worked out in juvenile court and never publicized. When he introduced himself, he said, "Harry, I knew your family, and last night I had a phone call from your pastor and Uncle John. They told me what had happened, and I'm down here to do what I can." John, I called him that first. That John, I called him that from the first, did most of the talking that day, but I liked him as soon as I saw him. Like me, he had once been involved with cars while working in an auto body shop. Then in 1952, he went into the Army for 2 years. After that, he wanted more education, so he enrolled in Farley Dickinson University at night. I learned he had graduated cum laude from the School of Business and had worked in the insurance field while attending law school at night. After he became a lawyer, he headed the legal department of a large insurance company, then joined a private law firm. Later, he began his own practice, then formed a partnership of civil and criminal trial work with Robert Kleinberg in Park Ridge. "You don't have to accept me as your lawyer," John stressed, "but if you'd like me to escort you to your arraignment, I'll be more than happy to appear with you in the courtroom this afternoon. After we go through the legal process, I'll talk with you if you wish. Then I'll see what aid I can give you or what other help I can get you." We shook hands firmly after this, and then John Taylor left for a meeting with my Uncle John and my father's relatives to talk about legal matters connected with the estate. Next, Dr. Thomas Belavia, the Bergen County jail physician, came to examine me. He asked if I had physical problems or if I was feeling sick. Then he inquired about allergies and offered me medication if I wanted something to calm me. He also asked if I used drugs, and I answered, just pot. I didn't want medication then, and I told him I'd be all right, so he wrote on his initial report that I had no real medical problems. He also wrote that he saw no evidence of concussion or broken ribs and no signs of bruises or physical abuses from hazing at the Citadel. I took issue with what he said since bruises and scars go away. I later saw him on other occasions for nervousness and insomnia and other minor physical ailments. After my time with the doctor, I shipped out of infirmary to the 5th floor south wing for 2 hours. Then I went to detention cell 4, where I stayed for the next few days. When they put me in detention 4, they kept up their suicide watch, and I had to sleep in front of the cell where officers could check on me. When I first came in, I didn't talk, and that made some inmates nervous. In fact, one got so paranoid he asked to be moved away from me, and whenever his tray of food came in, he wanted to trade with somebody else for fear his would get poisoned. Pastor Nilsson, whom I began to call Roy, came down for a visit on Monday to see what he could do, and I found out later that reporters asked him, "What kind of boy is Harry?" He answered, "He's a fine young man." Then, when they posed the question, "Suppose he is released today, where is he going to go?" The pastor, in his compassionate way, said, "He can come to my house. I have discussed it with my family, and even though we'd all be scared, we feel he needs a lot of love, and we have a lot to share." I don't condone the incident he cleared to the press, but it's a matter of putting on the line what I've always believed. I need forgiveness. So does my family, so does everyone. With all of our reservations, we would be willing to do this. When this statement was aired on TV and reported in various papers, it brought the pastor strong support, but it also brought threatening letters, and sometimes it brought hate mail. The pastor never abandoned me, though, and on my first Christmas in jail, he even left his family to sit with me in our visiting spot while I choked down Christmas dinner. The Hackensack arraignment on Monday was scheduled for 2 p.m., so at that time, I arrived in court wearing ripped black jail pants and a yellow shirt. Since all my clothes had been taken, I didn't have underwear or socks, and the pants were so short they ended 4 inches above my ankles. I didn't say a word in court, and someone described me later as looking like a teenage monk with my pale, gaunt cheeks and citadel cropped haircut. At first, the county prosecutor's office asked that bail either be denied or fixed at $1 million. Assistant prosecutor Richard Salkin represented the state, and during the 20-minute arraignment, he stated he was asking for high bail, $250,000 on each of the 4 counts of murder. Because as things stood at that time, I had no roots in the community. I'm being as candid as I can, Salkin contended. The bail figure should reflect what the defendant faces. 4 life sentences. These are extremely serious offenses. At the hearing, however, Judge Galda ruled that he was putting off any decision on bail until he received a full mental and physical report on me. Following the arraignment, Aunt Arden and Uncle John stayed to talk with me, and Aunt Arden said that I seemed confused when I tried to speak with them. If things were so terribly bad, she asked, why didn't you run away? You're 18. You could take off. Lots of people do. But where would I go? I responded. What would I do if I split? When she asked if I'd like to send flowers to the funeral home and church, I told her yes, and I'd like them placed right by my mother's head. I also confided on that first day that I'd thought of committing suicide as soon as I got to jail. Later, Aunt Arden would speak right up about certain things I'd say, but she sensed my mental state that day and just listened as I talked. John Taylor returned in the afternoon, and when we talked about lawyers, I told him that I wanted to handle my defense. He was the same age as my father. I wanted him to handle my defense. He was the same age as my father and he also had sons of his own. Later, some guards put pressure on me to talk to more than one lawyer, and they mentioned a crackerjack criminal lawyer they thought I should have. One of the guards kept pushing him, so I said I'd talk with him, but after we talked, I wanted John to continue to represent me. At this time, we won't worry about fees, John assured me, and whether you can pay or not, I promise you I will do the same for you that I do for my own 2 sons. You get whatever I'm capable of doing, and if you ever wish to change lawyers, I'll personally contact the lawyer for you. I ran into a roadblock in keeping John as my lawyer when the prosecutor's office wanted him removed from the case because he was municipal prosecutor in Montvale, where the crime occurred. In this post, he attended municipal court and handled minor complaints and violations, but the prosecutor's office contended this would give him access to the investigation. He would also be cross-examining the Montvale cops who aided in the murder investigation. 2 days after the Hackensack arraignment, I keep saying arrangement, there was a hearing on that, and in that December 1 session, which I attended in the black pants and yellow shirt, Judge Galda stated it would be a conflict of interest for John to continue as my attorney while acting as borough prosecutor. John agreed to resign from the post to handle my defense. Nice guy. My family's funeral was scheduled for Friday, December 3rd. Would you like to go under heavy guard? John asked the day before. No, I said, I just can't go. There's no way I can go. Later, when I saw Pastor Nelson, I removed a cross I always wore and asked to have it buried by my family's graves. I had bought it when I was in high school, and it had meant so much to me that I never took it off. When I gave it to the pastor, it wasn't my intention to have it buried with any one person. I wanted it with all of them, but later I learned that Pastor Nielsen had put it in my mother's casket at the funeral home. I thought about this for quite a while, and then I made up my mind that if this cross, which I'd treasure, had to be placed with one person, I wanted it in Eric's coffin. Of all the deaths in the family, His was imprinted most vividly. He was a victim of something that he had nothing to do with, so he shouldn't have suffered in any way, and he shouldn't have been beaten so badly. Put the cross in Eric's hands, I told Roy. That's where I want it to be. Starting with their first visit after the Hackensack arraignment, my mother's relatives, the Greers, came to see me each day. At first, my grandma Abneder, as my closest living relative, indicated she was willing to come and see me too. So did another person in the De La Roche family. But there are power people in the family structure, and one member who pulls a great deal of weight said nobody was to see me. At that, they all became hostile and wrote me off as dead. I wanted to see my grandmother, who meant a lot to me, but she was swayed by the others, and so she never came. She was executrix of my parents' estate, and at first there was some legal talk of having her removed because of a general feeling that she wasn't in a position to do it. She agreed in the beginning, but then she changed her mind. Finally, the situation was solved when John Taylor, the Ebneders, and the Greens had a meeting along with everyone's lawyer. John got the court to preserve the estate until a final determination of the criminal proceedings, and in the course of settling things, partially at least, everyone agreed that a small amount of money should be set aside to help me with the medical expenses and evaluations needed for my defense. I wouldn't have given him anything, but when these funds were released, my grandmother was retained. All of these things were happening in my first week and a half in jail, and though I came out of the comatose state I experienced on the first day, I was still, as my lawyer put it, floating along with the butterflies a great deal of the time. I stayed in really flubbing this. I stayed in detention 4 a few days, then they moved me to detention 3, where I was still watched over as a possible suicide. Sometimes this seemed like the answer too, because I was lonely and scared inside, and often very depressed, but other times I'd say to myself, jail isn't the place to die. Occasionally, I'd think of a dying declaration if my trial verdict was guilty, and contemplate having 2 razor blades so I could cut the jugular veins right there in the courtroom. After these thoughts of suicide, however, I began to calm down. One day, when I felt edgy, though, I asked to go to the green room. That was a very strange request, so the officer I talked to gave me a rather shocked, "What?" I answered, "Yes, you heard me. The green room is a detention room, and if a prisoner acts up, an officer sends him up there for protection or punishment. It's green tiled, which is where it gets its name, and while an inmate is there, a ceiling fan is turned on. You freeze up there when the fan is on because usually you're wearing no clothes. Nobody wants to go there, but on the day I requested it, one of the cellmates near me had threatened suicide. The whole thing was getting to me, and I didn't want to be there when the suicide happened. I also wanted to blow off steam and be by myself for a while, so when I went there for the night, I cried a little while. I wouldn't have wanted my cellmates to see me doing that. While I was there, my arms were strapped to a bunk the officer brought in. Again, they feared I'd kill myself and were taking no chances of that. I was up there for 12 hours, and when I came down, the suicidal inmate had swallowed a TV antenna. He was rushed to Bergen Pines Hospital and operated on. Why the fuck would you swallow a TV antenna? One of the things that kept me alive those first few days in jail was the mail that started coming in, not only from the people I knew, but also from total strangers. The first to arrive was a card from my church signed by 50 people. Other letters I've saved said, "Dear Harry, I don't quite know what to say to you. I guess most importantly, I should tell you I'm behind you. I know, and you know you know what you did is wrong, but who are we to judge? When I think about what you went through, I wonder how you did it. I guess I also feel very guilty because when you did stuff with us at church, or when I saw you at school, I treated you like everyone else. I could kick myself now because I feel like I only added to your problems. It's something I'll have to live with. All I'm asking is that you accept me as your friend now. I know Pastor has said you could always stay at his house. Well, if anything goes wrong with that, you always have a home with us. Don't think you have no friends because you have a lot. And you have a great friend in Steve. Just remember, you've got a friend no matter what happens to you. Love, Debbie Weir. Dear Harry, you may not remember me, but I lived across the street from you when we lived in Lodi. When you were a baby, I played with you and cared for you. Then I walked you to school until you moved to Montvale. I'm 25 now with a family of my own. Harry, I know you're going through a difficult time, but you mustn't feel alone because you are in my thoughts and prayers. Sincerely, a friend. Dear Harry, we all understand the terrific pressures you have been under. Don't lose your courage or hope. I am sure there are good, intelligent people like your lawyer and minister who will stand by you. Cooperate with them and trust them. I'm a mother of 2 sons, and I hope you will accept offers of friendship from people who understand your problems. Just forgive yourself. A friendly neighbor, Carol Roberts. I didn't answer those letters since I didn't know what to say, but I finally sat down and wrote to Steve early in December. Steve! And there's my chooch. Steve, how are you doing, my brother? It isn't that bad. Only the food and being in my cell about 24 hours a day sucks. Steve, I will try to write as often as I can. Hope you will write me more than you did when I was down at the Citadel. Don't believe everything you read in here. What if I told you that I didn't fail my polygraph? The pigs can't understand what that means. They didn't ask the right question. Someday I will tell you the whole story. I think you'll agree that what I did, the complete story, was right. I'll tell my pastor what it is, but he won't be able to tell you for a while. You know me well enough to know I couldn't blow away my whole family. Read between the lines and you will start to see the truth. Yes, I gave 2 statements. There are bits and parts that are totally true. I wish I could tell you, but I promised someone something, and I can't go back on my word. Anyway, you will know the whole story after the trial, which should be a year from now. So, my little brother, till you're right, Harry. By the 2nd week in December, I started to come to my senses. So when the Greers came to visit on December 8, I asked them to contact Pastor Nilsson. I have something to tell him, I said. It's urgent. I see him right away. Right away. Right away. And that's the end of chapter 7. Chapter 8, These Things Don't Happen to People You Know, is next. Bye, bruv. Bye-bye.